I would like to share with y'all one of my very favorite verses in the Bible. It's Mark chapter 8, verse 15. Mark chapter 8, verse 15. And what Mark chapter 8, verse 15 says is, "And he charged them, saying, Take heed, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod." So the leaven of the Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. So I'm just going to keep that leaven there. Now I'll draw a little line there like that, and a little line there. So the leaven of Pharisees and the leaven of Herod. Now, Herod was a ruler. Now, leaven being a type of sin, usually, there's one exception, is a type. So leaven is a type of sin, like we said, except for that one exception. Now, wanting to be a king in your own pride and in your wise in your own conceits, that was the first lie in the Bible in Genesis chapter 3. That's what Satan tempted Eve with, and Adam fell into the same temptation when he said, "Your eyes will be open and you will be as gods, knowing good and evil." Well, a god means a judge or a magistrate. And if you're judging and people are listening to you in that way, then you are a king. Now, what I always try to explain to people is the reason why Jesus said other believers are our family. So I'm going to back up a little here. So other believers, the scripture says, is our family, not literal family like mom and dad. Oftentimes, mom and dad meet this criteria of a false king, a false ruler, or false gods because you will go to them for false judgment. So you'll go to your mom or dad. And when the scriptures say honor your mother and father, it's actually saying to be weighty. It means to be weighty. So you want to give your mom the truth and your dad the truth. And that's even how you love your enemy, right? You don't love your enemy by compromising. The scripture isn't saying to like your enemy. It's saying to love your enemy. And the way you do that is by telling them truth, and you're actually adding respect to them by them hearing the truth, God's truth. And that's what the scripture calls a king and priest in the good sense, is someone who does God's judgment and gives people Yahweh's judgment. So the opposite of that is this idea of leaven. Now I'm going to go ahead and erase this. So we saw that it said that the leaven of the Pharisees. So we're going to go ahead and look at that a little more. Well, the Pharisees and the scribes, and you can do some important history lessons about this as well. And it also warns you in Scripture to beware of the leaven of the Sadducees. Let me find that verse real quick. Sorry if I look down for a moment. So in another place it says, I believe it's Matthew 16. So let me go to Matthew 16 and check that for you real quick. Matthew 16:16. Matthew 16:11. So Matthew 16:11 says, "How is it that ye do not understand that I spake it not to you concerning bread, that you should beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees?" So he also includes the Sadducees here. Let me see. And that word Sadducees, if you're familiar with the word Melchizedek, Sadducees is that same part as that ending Zadok. and that was a priest. So, as in the Sadducees, and Melchi means king in the scripture. If you look up the word king in the Hebrew, it's Melchi, and Zadok is one of the names of the priest, and that's why Melchizedek means king of Salem, priest of the Most High God, as it says in Genesis chapter 14. And then it speaks of Melchizedek in Hebrews chapter 5, chapter 6, and chapter 7. And then in Revelations chapter 1 and in Revelations chapter 5, it calls us kings and priests. And also in 1 Peter chapter 2, it says a royal priesthood. And then again, I believe it's Exodus 20, calls Israel a kingdom of priests. So kingdom of priests, kings and priests, a royal priesthood. That word royal in the Greek means kingly. So anyways, these evil men here, these evil Pharisees and scribes and Sadducees or Sadducees, if you want to look up that priest whose name was Zadok, it has nothing to do with him, aside from the fact that the Sadducees said that's where they originated from. Now, the Pharisees and the scribes, I know that they had two schools. They had the school of Hillel and Shammai. And I believe that the Pharisees had to do with this school and the Sadducees had to do with this school, Shammai. And this was the more liberal college for the rabbis, and this was the more loose one here. And it also has to do with the political climate. I can't remember exactly who was associated with who right off my bat or right off hand, but these were the schools here. So when we're talking about the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, in another place here in Scripture, it says that he's telling them to beware of their doctrine. So let me look up this other one. Excuse me for 1 second while I find that when it says to beware of their doctrine. So let me see. So Luke 12:1. I'm going to look in Luke 12:1. And you want to take all of these into account because each one gives you a little portion of the bigger picture. So Luke 12:1. And he says, beware ye of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy. And then I know there's one that says it's their doctrine. Let me see. So let me look over here once again. So let me see. Luke or Mark 16. Let me see 16:6. So there's one place where he says, beware of the... Okay, sorry. It wasn't Jesus' words. So that's what confused me. So in Matthew 16, verse 12, it says, then understood they how that he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. So out of these schools here, their doctrine was being made out of the rabbinical schools. So the rabbi or the rabbin. So what that amounts to is that their college. Just like today, these people that they call pastors, they're not pastors. They have people they call preachers, they're not preachers. The people that they call minister, they're not ministers. These things that they call ministry is not ministry. The people that they call deacons are not deacons. The people that they call bishops are not bishops. They're just these college graduates, these educated men who have gone through these colleges and learned a lot of false doctrine. So they can join this false institutional system called church. Now that word church comes from the same group of words as in, I'm going to step back and right here. circle, like that's where you get the prayer circles from. And Cersei made the sailors go around in circles. So that also has to do with Cersei, and she gave the people the drink of her cup, and it turned them into swine and beasts. And that's exactly what happens in, I believe it's Revelation chapter 17. She gave them the drink of her golden cup of abominations and filthy from the, I can't remember exactly how it says it, but the wine of her fornication. And then another word in that same family is circus. And a circus is where you go to see all this crazy stuff, and they have this crazy show and weird tall people, short people, deformed people. They might even hire midgets to do weird things, and so all of this weird stuff and animals standing up and balancing on balls. Well, these are all related, and they all are related to that word church. And that's why church is a place where a lot of strange stuff goes on. Just like all of this mixing of language and this mixture here. So the leaven of the Pharisees we've seen, and the Sadducees and of Herod, have to do with the leaders and the educated men, right? So people who the world calls leaders, not true leaders. The scripture makes it plain that Christ is our leader. And then these college people, right? These college people, the Pharisees and Sadducees and these leaders, they all are like, we're educated and we're really something and we have this spectacular judgment. Well, that has nothing to do with God. They look real good in the world's eyes, right? The world, the arrangements of mankind in these, they control the census and their consensus views, and it's always, all of the judgment comes from a small group, right? And the group calls these leaders ravenous wolves. So the leaven of the scribes and the Pharisees and of Herod is this idea of rulership and educated class. We know that from what it said there about their beware of their doctrine. And then Herod was a governor. So this has to do with what Satan's temptation was. And all through Scripture, you'll find Satan, the serpent, the devil, the dragon, Leviathan, closely connected to these educated